Hello all, very good morning. Thanks for joining the session. Let me share my screen. So yesterday we have seen the Spring Boot definition. Like Spring Boot is an opinionated framework with the convention over configuration approach. Spring Boot is an opinionated framework with the convention over configuration approach to build the Spring-based applications quickly and then easily. So here we need to understand what is this convention over configuration and what is this opinionated framework, and also Spring Boot is a utility framework. So what is utility framework, what is opinionated approach, and what is convention over configuration? These are all the things that we need to understand. But before doing that, why we are going for the Spring Boot? So what is the main goal of the Spring Boot? So the official documentation is saying the main goal of the Spring Boot is to quickly develop the applications, rapid application development. So the main goal of the Spring Boot is quickly create Spring-based applications without requiring the developer to write the same boilerplate configuration again and again. What does it mean? What does it mean is Spring Boot is taking care of the configuration support, and developer need to only write the code. So business logic, the developer need to write. So that is the reason the developer's job will be easy, and then developer can only focus on writing the business logic and not on configurations. So when developer is only focused on the business logic, a lot of time that he spent in doing the configurations, he will save. That is how using Spring Boot the rapid application development is happening. But so far we have the Spring WebMVC also. What's the problem with the WebMVC? So let us try to understand what's the problem with the WebMVC first. So meaning if we would like to go with the WebMVC, what are all the problems that we will face? Not problems actually, the word I should not use problems. But if we use the Spring WebMVC, what are all the configurations that a developer need to do apart from writing the business logic? And if you go with the Spring Boot, how that configuration part has been taken care by the Spring Boot. So today, what we will do is, let us see if we implement a Spring WebMVC application. If we implement a Spring WebMVC application, what and how we can do the configurations. So today, let's see this one. Let's see if we implement a Spring WebMVC application, what and how we can do the configurations, and if we implement the same application using Spring Boot, right? How Spring Boot is taking the configurations responsibility. So this is what we will see. So what and how we can do the configurations in the case of the Spring WebMVC. And if the same Spring WebMVC application, if we implement using the Spring Boot, how Spring Boot is taking the configurations responsibility and developer is only focused on the business logic is what we will see practically today. So that we understood the powerfulness of the Spring Boot, like, configuration management, auto configuration management. Automatically, it will do the configurations based on the conventions that we were configured. Based on the conventions that we were configured, the Spring Boot will takes the auto configurations. So it is not so easy term, whatever I have used. Besides it or behind it, there is a lot of patterns associated to it. Okay, however, let's not go into that depth as it is just a demo tool. So what I would like to showcase you is now practically how Spring Boot, meaning why we are going for the Spring Boot. Though we have the WebMVC, Spring WebMVC applications or Spring WebMVC module is there. And so far, at least till 2015, 16, 17, most of the applications were implemented using the Spring WebMVC. And now why the people are moving towards to the Spring Boot. So those things we will practically observe now. So those things we will practically observe now. So in order to see that, first we need to understand the Spring WebMVC application and its working. Spring WebMVC, how the Spring WebMVC will work, we need to understand first. So Spring WebMVC is one of the module of our Spring framework. So did you remember we have written the, meaning we have drafted the Spring core architecture. So we even can see now. So Spring framework architecture, if you can see, just let's go to the official website and then, yeah, this is the official website. So in official website, you can see there is a web module. In web module, we have the web. This is the web MVC. And then this is the web. And this entire module is called as web MVC or remoting. So there is a module called web, servlet, portlet, struts. So we will work with this web MVC module now. So while working with this web MVC module, what are all the things we required is, the first thing is we need to understand now the MVC architecture. So what is this model, view, and then controller? MVC architecture is what we need to understand now. Okay, so we have the this model view controller is coming up with the two models. One is the model 1 or MVC1 and model 2 or MVC2. So this MVC nothing but model view controller. So carefully listen, please. Carefully listen. First, in entire architecture. Okay. So first, let us understand the entire architecture. Entire architecture. An application architecture is said to be an entire architecture if it will have a minimum of 3 layers or tiers. 3 layers or tiers arranged one above the other. One above the other and communicating one above the other and communicating for serving the request and response. So this is the entire architecture. So first we need to understand entire architecture. That means an application architecture is said to be an entire architecture if it will have a minimum of 3 layers or tiers. So this is entire architecture is talking about. Now let's go for MVC. In MVC, we have the model 1 architecture. So let's go and then see the model 1 architecture. Just let me discard it. Just let me discard it. Let me discard this lot of diagrams. Fine. So in MVC 1 architecture, before MVC, I'm talking about before MVC. Before MVC, we have the servlet. We have the servlet technology. In servlet technology, this is a servlet. right? Maybe let us consider login servlet. This is a login servlet. And here are the users. Let's say any user who submitted the data, right? Maybe some kind of a farm data, right? So let us choose some farm data. This is some farm data. So once the user will fill this form, right, and submit the form. So he will enter the username, he will enter the password, and then submit the form. So when the form will be submitted, the username and then password will be given to this servlet, right? So that means servlet is now able to take the user input. So that is called as what, request input handling logic. So request input handling logic, maybe request parameters, or maybe the context parameters, or maybe the query parameters, whatever it is. So whatever the form we submitted, that form data is called as the request input handling logic. Once the request input is taken, then request input we need to validate. So that validation logic also we will write inside the same servlet. And after validation is done, we have to go to database, and then we have to do some business logic, isn't it? So here is what the business logic. Before MVC I'm talking about. So this is the business logic. And after business logic, so maybe it is giving us the response. So response handling logic. And maybe so response handling logic, that means creating the session. Response handling logic, that means keeping data in session. So hope we all know about the servlet, right? So keeping data in session or request scope, whatever it is. Then finally, response handling logic, like how we will meaning the view handling logic, view page, right? So that means the JSP. So view handling logic or view logic, we can say simple. View logic meaning what JSP need to be rendered, how the JSP need to be rendered. All this is called as the view logic. Carefully observe. This is before the MVC. Before the MVC. Now, what is happening in this single servlet model? All the logics like input handling, input validation, business logic, all these logics are mixed up here. Point number one, all the logics are mixed up here. So let us write here. All the logics are mixed up. Next, doing changes to one logic may affect the other logic, right? For example, if we do some business logic changes here, any exceptions or issues will be there, or while writing, if we do any mistake, maybe our entire servlet won't work because of this mistake here. So this logic affected the other logics, right? Next. So what is the next point? So all the logics are mixing up. That is the point number one. and doing the change in one logic is affecting the other logic, then tight coupling of the code. Tight coupling of the code, meaning one logic is affecting other logic, meaning 100% it is tight coupling of the code. So this is the reason we got the model 1, model 2 architectures. So in model 1 architecture, what it is exactly? So let me copy and then take one new. In model 1 architecture, now it is before MVC we have discussed now, right? Before MVC. So that means what? When we have the servlets and then JSP technology available. So this is what. So now what we will do, now what will happen with the model 1, now let us discuss about the model 1. Carefully observe. Model 1 architecture. In model 1 architecture, what suggested is separate the request handling logic and then business logic. So that means we were taking some helper classes here using a lot of design patterns. So we were taking some helper pattern here. So this helper is called as maybe service layer, or maybe some helper. Some helper class. So this helper class contains this business logic. So this business logic code is now moved to the helper. And this helper and then this servlet, or whatever it is, maybe we can say it as controller, because controlling all the logics, right? Data handling, input logic, input data taking, input validation, right? And then response data, preparation. So these are all handling. So we can call it as a controller. So login servlet controller. So controller is a component who is controlling all these logics. Then as per the model 2, now the business logic is separated. And these two components are speaking each other using various design patterns. Maybe singleton, maybe factory, maybe business delegate, whatever it is, but using some pattern. So they are communicating each other. So this helper class is giving the response here. Whatever the data that is giving by the helper, that data is now keeping in the session storage. So that means whatever the data that the helper is giving, data response, for example, token, login token, right? Maybe any other data as well. So let me take the text here. Perfect. Now response, whatever the helper class is giving, maybe token, maybe user registered information, right? Maybe whatever it is. So whatever the logic we are performing, all search all users, find all users, maybe logic of username and password validation, then giving the token to us, whatever it is, but it is keeping in the session. So now this session data will display on our view logic. Guys, can you please mute? Thanks. The session data is now tightly coupling. Session data is now maintaining in this session. This business logic response is maintaining in this session. So this is what the model 1 architecture. So in model 1 architecture, we have resolved one problem. That is, we have resolved the problem of avoiding the, now in model 1 architecture, what happened? Request input, guys, can you please mute? So input handling logic and input processing logic, input processing, that is business logic. So input handling logic and input processing logic are separated. So that is what happened in the model 1 architecture, right? So as a result, what will happen? As a result, when any changes.
Sir, it is model 1 or model 2?
Model 1. Let me explain. It is model 1. So as a result, when any changes happen in the, when any changes happen in the helper, no effect on controller. So this is the model 1. But still in the model 1, we have one problem. So what is that? View logic is tightly coupled, right? View logic is tightly coupled. That means assume here we are writing some view logic, some JSP code we are writing in the servlet. We can do, right? We can write, right? JSP code we can write in the servlet as well. Assume we are writing that code here. If any tag not closed, if any tag not opened, or list of customers we have here in the session, those we are iterating here. So to iterate the list of customers, we need some JSTL tags. Maybe we were written some wrong tag. As a result, we got some error. So due to this error, the servlet controller also entire component get into the error, right? Or else any modification we will do here, that also affect the other logics, tightly coupling. So in model 1 architecture, still there will be a problem. What is that problem? Is the tightly coupling between the view logic. Just let me plug in my charger. Yeah. Now let us create one more diagram. So to address the issue that we have in the model 1, let's go to the model 2. So this is the model 2. So now in model 2, what it is suggesting us is the architectural models. So what it is suggesting is separate the view logic also. So now here, if you can see, this view logic also gets separated. So this view logic, whatever the view logic is here, so let us take a separate view component, and we'll take the view helper pattern here. Then we will separate this view logic to here. Now this view will be rendered. Perfect. So this is what the not here. So this view will be displayed to these customers. Got it? Huh? Now what will happen? Now what will happen in model 2 architecture? In model 2 architecture, what will happen? The view logic is also now separated. So controller is now having only the request handling logic. One moment, guys. Yeah. Okay. So this request handling logic is only at the controller end, and the request processing, meaning the business logic, is now separated to the helper component, and now the view part is also separated, right? So this is what the model 2. Now in model 2, what happened? All the logics are separated. In model 2 architecture, all the logics are separated, isn't it? Got the point, right? In model 1, we have still the dependency on the controller view logic part. In model 1, we have still the dependency on the view logic part. But in model 2, what happened? It is separated. So as a result, what happened? Clear separation of all the logics has been achieved. So clear separation of all the logics has been achieved now. Fine. So we got the clear separation of the logics. Total, how many layers we got now, or how many tiers we got now? A total of how many tiers or how many layers now we got? 3. Correct? 3. One is the controller layer or tier. So what is the difference between layer and then tier? So layer and then tier, both are interchangeably used. Both are interchangeably used. Now this model 2 architecture is now having 3 separate layers, right? This is the model layer. This model 2 is called as so this is the model layer. So we also called it as a model layer, and we also called now this as the controller layer, and this also we are calling as view layer, right? So now this is the view layer. Now what happens? See, 3 layers we got: view layer, model layer, and then controller layer. So if you can see, model, view, and then controller, right? So this is called what? Controller. Now if you can see, this is the model, and this is the view, this is the controller. So this is called MVC. Model 2 is called as what? MVC architecture. Model 2 is called as MVC architecture. So here what happened? We have the view logic plus the controller logic and then the model logic. So both these three logics were derived, and these 3 logics were separated for us. Isn't it? These 3 logics are separated. Now tell me, is it entire architecture or not? Because we have written one definition. So we have written one definition. What is that? An application architecture is said to be an entire architecture if it will have a minimum of 3 layers or tiers arranged one above the other and communicating for serving the request and response. Now tell me, is it entire architecture or not? Obviously entire architecture, because minimum 3 layers or tiers we have. Now what is the difference between layer and tier? What is the difference between layer and tier? So here if you can see the application components, one module can have all these layers. So how the design will be, for example, we have a user module can have all these 3 or more layers. Maybe we have the login module may have these 3 or more layers. Registration module also may have these 3 or more layers, right? So registration may have 3 or more layers. Like that, each and every module can contains again these 3 or more layers arranged one above the other. So now, what is the layer? What is tier? Assume in a application. So in an application, so this is the application. In this application, if you can see, customers is the module. In customers module, we have the customers controller, customers model, customers view. Here only, customer view. That means what? Within the same application, in my single JVM, in my single JVM, within the same application, we have all the model, controller, and then view layers. So if these are all within the single JVM, then we call it as a layers. Sometimes what might happen, this business logic or model might be in some other tier or in some other geographical area. So when the application components are dispersed over the geographical areas and then connecting together using remoting or maybe any other approach, that is called the tiers. That means assume this model is executing, this model layer is implemented by the members in the US, and these guys are exposing one SOAP XML to you. So you will consume that SOAP XML and parse the data and then show in the view layer. Or maybe this model is writing by the Japan team or Canada team. They are exposing a web service, RESTful service. That RESTful service, you can take it and then use it, right? So now this will be, the model will be a tier in this case, because it is managing by some other members. Or maybe this also possible. This is maybe the US team who are writing the logic and then giving the jar file to us. That jar file we are keeping in our application and then getting the data from it. This is also possible. So meaning this is geographically now separated. So when geographically separated, that is called as a tier. But in a single JVM, in a single application, when all these application components are arranged, then that is called as a layer. So let us write the definitions here. So MVC1 we have written, and then tier. What is tier? If the application components were dispersed, to the different geographical areas and combining using the various other options like remoting, then those application components are called as tiers. Now, what is layer? Layer meaning the application components will be arranged on a single JVM. If the application components will be arranged on a single JVM and communicating each other using various design patterns, then these components of the application are called as layers, right? Now that is the difference between the tier and then layer. So what is tier and then what is layer? So then what is MVC? An application is said to a MVC application have the application components. If you have the application components separated into a minimum of 3 tiers or layers and performing the below logics, that is the request handling a request and response handling logic called controller. So if any component which is handling the request and response, that is called as controller. And then business logic handling is called as the model. And then the view logic handling is called as the view layer. So an application is said to be a MVC application if it have the application component separated into a minimum of 3 tiers or layers and performing the below logics. So request and response handling logic is performed by the controller component. A request meaning in real time you may submit the form, isn't it? For example, here is the application. So what you will do, you will create maybe one customer. So this is the form. So this form you may submit. For example, test 6 maybe user. So test user 6 maybe test user 6 at the rate yopmail.com. Test user at rate 123 mobile number. So now done. So this is what you are submitting the form, right? You are submitting the form. Now when you submit the form, then your test user 6 may got here, right? Your test user 6 may got here. That means what? When you submit the form, whatever the data you entered is taken by this controller component. And then that data, whatever we entered, right? That might be saving into the database or maybe performing some validations, not validation, performing some business checkings. Maybe email is valid or not. For example, if you entered any of the dummy email, so just entered any of the dummy email, test 7 user, test user 7. So any dummy email, let us entered test user 7 at the rate email.com, password test user at the rate 123, and then mobile number. Now this will do what? Email will be valid or not, it will check and then throw us an error. Email domain is not valid. Please enter the valid email address. So this is a business logic. So which is handled in this business component, right? So where is our business component? So here is our business component. So this component will take the data, whatever we entered, and that data will be given to this helper. Helper will validate the constraints, not input logic validation, whether first name entered or not, whether last name entered or not, whether email entered or not, whether email is in a proper format or not. No, that is not. That is the validation logic. But this is checking what, the domain exists or not. If you can observe carefully, what I entered, email.com. So this is verifying the domain, not the email format. Email format verification is different. At the rate is there or not, .com is there or not, or dot is there or not, right? So at the rate before and at the rate after dot is there or not. This is called email format validation. But here not format validation we are doing. Whether the entire domain, the domain what we entered is valid or not, we are checking. So that is what the business criteria. So business logic handling is taken by this one. and this will gives us the response to it. And that response is given to this view layer, and the view layer is rendering the response to us. So that is where we can see this response message in our view page. Correct. So now what is happening in this process? So controller is taking the input request, whatever the um, request we have given, right? So yeah, so whatever the request we have given, that is taken by the controller component. So this is taking the request and validating. For example, first name I entered wrong, last name I have not entered. So it is doing the validation, then giving the entire validated data to the our model layer. Then model is doing some business logic and then giving the response. Based on the model response, then the controller is doing a response handling logic preparation and then invoke this view layer. Then view layer with the data that is suggesting by the controller and the data that we got from the business layer. So it will showcase the messages on the view layer to the users. So this is called the view layer. So in a typical MVC application, we'll have these three: model, view, and then controller. So this is called the MVC. Perfect, right? Now, as we got to know now MVC and then entire architecture. So Spring also providing such a MVC architecture. So meaning using Spring, we can also implement the controller and then helper logics and then view logics. That means Spring is providing the support for this controller logic writing. That means request handling logic, input taking, right? And then response preparation logic, right? Kind of a session handling logic, and then view rendering logics. So these are all the support is given by this Spring also with the framework called Spring Web MVC. So with the framework called Spring Web MVC, it is giving the MVC support to us. In MVC, what is the main component for us? Controller is, of course, all other components are doing their dedicated job, but controller is the centric component, main component, isn't it? Controller is the centric component. So what the centric component will do, it will take the request data, perform the validations, and prepare the response also, isn't it? Keep the data in the session and then invoke the view layer components, and those view layer components will be rendered inside. So, but Spring Web MVC is giving this in a way like this. So just let me, first of all, let me save this diagram so that I can give these diagrams in your classroom. So this is model 2 architecture. Model 2 architecture. This is Spring Boot docs. Right. This is model 2 architecture. Now let me save it as a model 1 architecture. So model 1 architecture. This is model 1 architecture, and this is the before model 1 architecture or Servlet technology architecture. So let me close this. Now model 1 also let me close. Now model 2 is here. So now Spring Web MVC is also providing the MVC support for us, right? So not only Spring Web MVC, any framework. Now we need to understand what is framework. Okay, so far you have seen the model 2 architecture, nothing but MVC. So this is your model 2 architecture, nothing but MVC. And in this MVC, if we can see, all the three layers or tiers were there, which are performing the logics. This is model 2 architecture. By taking the model 2 architecture, the frameworks like Struts or JSP or Spring Web MVC, So they added a few components around these 3 layers for the better management of the request handling logic, and then providing their framework. So how it will be? How it will be is, this is the model 2, isn't it? In Spring, there will be always, not only in Spring, I'm talking about, not only in Spring, any framework you can take. Any framework you can take. So there will be a framework servlet here. There will be a framework servlet here. What is the use of it? I'll explain. So here is a framework servlet. So which is also called as a front controller design pattern. This is the implementation of the front controller design pattern. So I'll explain about the front controller design pattern in a moment of time, or maybe tomorrow. So this is the front controller design pattern. Now, if you can see here in model 2 architecture, user requests are directly given to the controller. But here, the user request will first reach out to the framework servlet. So framework servlet will take all the requests first, no matter how many requests are coming. All the requests will take. Again, there is one more problem here. This is not like your Node.js application. Node.js is, non-blocking IO. For example, 1,000 requests are coming. Node.js will take 1,000 requests at a time, but your Spring framework don't take like that. Will take one request, one after the other request it will take. Okay, one after the other request it will take. Not all the requests at a time it won't take. That is the reason in Spring 5 we have the reactive programming, again, which is a non-blocking IO. However, that is different story. So when the user in the any framework, not only Spring Web MVC, in Servlet to JSF, any framework you can take. I'm talking about a new word called framework. Framework. In any framework, if you can take, there will be a framework servlet. So now we are talking about framework, right? So what is framework? What is framework? So framework is a semi-finished application. Framework is a semi-finished application, right? That we can customize as per our requirement. So framework is a semi-finished application that we can customize as per our requirement. What is the semi-finished application? That means if we use the framework, then we no need to write this request handling logic, request input validation logic. We no need to write anything. The framework only giving the support for this. So framework will tell us, in order to take the request into the controller, you do like this. In order to validate, you do like this. So framework is providing us the already readily implemented classes or interfaces. It is providing to us. So we just need to know how to use them. We just need to know how to use them. That means what? Half of the job is already doing by the framework. So framework meaning what? It is a semi-finished application. Framework is a semi-finished application that can be customized even as per our requirement. So semi-finished meaning what? All other logic. For example, keeping the data into session. You no need to open a session. You no need to put the data into session. Of course, we need to put into the data, but you no need to open a session. Session will be opened. Session handling will be already given by the framework. Now this view logic. You no need to write a response redirections, response forwarding logics. We don't need to do. So framework is already designed in such a way, identifying the view page and then rendering, right? So framework meaning a semi-finished application. All are already given. We just need to know how to use it. That's it. We just need to know how to use it. So that is what the framework. So one such framework is Spring Web MVC. That means in Spring Web MVC also, all the controller handling, meaning all the request handling, request validation, all these logics were already given. Meaning not logics, but all the support is already given. So we need to extend that support and then customize it according to our requirement. So that is the reason to handling various framework specific request handlings and all. Every framework will have a framework servlet called front controller. This is a front controller design pattern implementation. So every framework will have a framework servlet called front controller. Like that, our Spring also having one framework servlet called dispatcher servlet. One framework servlet called dispatcher servlet. We know who will instantiate the servlets. Always servlets are created by the meaning. Always servlets are instantiation. What is instantiation? The process of creating the object is called what? Instantiation, isn't it? So who will instantiate the servlets? Obviously the servers, like your Tomcat, JBoss, WebLogic, whatever it is. Servers will instantiate the servlet, right? So that means this entire thing need to be run in a server first, isn't it? So however, now each and every request will come to this framework servlet first. Then framework servlet will do a lot of things. In depth of this dispatcher servlet we will discuss going forward. But this framework servlet will identifying the component, identifying the classes called handlers. So for this dispatcher servlet, these are called as handlers. All the controller components are called as handlers for the dispatcher servlet. So this is the handler component. Handlers. For the dispatcher servlet, this is a handler, nothing but a controller. Now this handler will inform to this framework servlet. So this handler will inform to this framework servlet about the view page, and about the data rendering logics and all, at least about the view page. Right? So now this handler will give the response to this framework servlet. Now framework servlet, that is dispatcher servlet, will do what? It will go and then locate these view pages, not directly. It will locate these view pages, and whatever the view page it got, the view logic it got, so that view page, that view logic is rendered to the user. Now if you can see this entire architecture, everything is managing from the framework servlet only. Everything is managing from the framework servlet only. That is dispatcher servlet. Right? Everything is managing from the framework servlet only. That is dispatching servlet. That means each and every request is coming to this framework servlet and going out from the framework servlet. There is no other place. That is the reason this is called as a front controller, front door, front gate. And this front controller is managing, not managing, delegating. The right word is what? Delegating. This front controller is delegating the request to the handler component. Now handler component will take the data that is coming from the user submission form and take the data, perform the validation, give it to the helper class, and then get the data, put into this session, and then give the view name to this framework servlet, view name. So here we can write one thing, give the view name. So one moment, sorry. Give the view name. So whatever the view name is there, right? So that view name will be given to the dispatcher servlet. That is framework servlet. Now framework servlet will use the view resolvers to resolve the name. This dispatcher servlet will use the view resolvers. So here the view resolvers will come to resolve the exact view meaning page, JSP page or HTML page, whatever it is. So it will use the resolvers to resolve the original view page based on the name it is returning by the controller to this dispatcher servlet. Got it right? So it is, let me take this color. This is the view resolver. Now view resolver is doing what? Resolving the view and then giving the view information back to this dispatcher servlet. Here it is just giving the view name only, but where is that view? So that means if you can see here, controller, we are just giving the view name only, right? HTML, customer.html, and then the signup.html. The controller is only giving the just names of the view to the dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will use the view resolvers to locate originally where they are. For example, they are in this templates. They are in this templates like fragments, and then the dashboard, customer, sign up. So the actual name, whatever the name exactly we given here, with that exact name, there is a view page here. So how the dispatcher servlet came to know that this view name, this is the view name, and with that view name, there is a view page because of this view resolvers. Right? So let us discuss in depth of it while going forward. But this is usually the framework design. Every framework will come up with this common design only. So any framework you can take. There is kind of a framework servlet, there is kind of a view resolver, there is kind of a handler. So this is common for every framework. Similarly, Spring framework also came up, Spring WebMVC framework also came up with these components. So tomorrow, let us create one Spring WebMVC application, right? Then there you will get a clear picture, like how the dispatcher servlet configuration, how the handler configuration and all, you will get the clarity. That's all for today. Any questions for me? Fine. If no questions for me, then I will stop my screen share, and all these, whatever the diagrams I have drafted will post in your classroom. So what is the advantage of learning the Spring Boot instead of Node.js? In Node.js, you have to write all the logics, database logics. First of all, Node.js is a script which will execute at the browser side. Without JavaScript enabling in the browser, Node.js won't work. That means your browser needs to be forcibly enabled with the JavaScript. And remember, all the browsers may or may not enable the JavaScript. For example, you are browsing something in your mobile. Did your mobile browser enabled with the JavaScript? No, not required. Not required to be enabled. Maybe some secure applications may not enable the JavaScript as well. So that's an option, but what I'm saying is basically Node.js is a script-based framework. JavaScript, it will work based on the JavaScript. But coming to the Spring Boot, it won't depends on the JavaScript, no matter whether you will have the JavaScript enabled or not. But if you have a response rendering mechanism at the UI side, you can good to use it. Second, Spring Boot is a auto configuration framework we'll discuss going forward. But Node.js is not like that. In Node.js, you need to write everything. Database connectivities, database logics, whatever it is, you need to write everything. But in Spring Boot, it is auto configured. In Node.js, if it will take 5 minutes to write one application, Spring Boot, it will take only 1 minute to write the same application, right? But the only disadvantage is what? Node.js is non-blocking IO. At a time, 1,000 requests it will take. But Spring Boot is not non-blocking IO. It is a blocking IO. That is the reason from the Spring 5 onwards, the reactive programming concept introduced, which is also a non-blocking IO. So now, when you compare with the Node.js and then Spring Boot, so which one will be the chosen option is different story. There were a lot of measurements, right? But what is the advantage of learning Spring Boot instead of Node.js is also a wrong question, because Node.js is a different framework. Spring Boot is a different framework. Node.js will be run in the NPM, Node Package Manager, meaning the Node.js server. Spring Boot is run in the any other web servers. Node.js server is a JavaScript-based engine. All other Spring Boot servers are the Java-based engines. So complete diversity, different. We don't compare them. If you learn the Node.js, you will become the backend developer, but you are most of the work with the scripting. If you learn the Spring Boot, you are most of the work with the programming. Okay, that is the difference. So when you will provide the class link, so once you all done the registrations, then I'll provide the classroom link. Probably by the next Monday, I will provide the classroom links. Okay, so in which situation ideal to choose Spring Boot as tech stack over the backend technologies? Simple. If you want to develop the application very fast, if you want to concentrate only on the business logic, not configurations, then go for the Spring Boot. So Spring Boot will take care of the configuration. Then being a developer, you just focus on writing the business logic. That's it. Your development becomes very fast. So that is the reason even no option nowadays. Everyone is choosing for the Spring Boot only. They even not thinking about the other Java frameworks or other Spring frameworks, meaning other Spring modules, I mean to say. So daily recordings will be provided. Sir, what is mean by opinionated? We'll discuss. I have not started Spring Boot yet. We just have written one definition. The meaning of that definition, by attending 2 to 3 sessions, you came to know. In a single session, it won't be, isn't it? So today we discussed about the model 1, model 2 architectures. And then tomorrow we will write one Spring Web MVC application. And then we will see a little problems there. Boilerplate code we will see there. So that boilerplate configuration will be avoided using the Spring Boot. So same application, let us implement using Spring Boot, and you will feel the difference. Oh, this is what the Spring Boot might be. Then we will start understanding the opinionated approach and then convention over configuration. These two terms we need to, because convention over configuration is a object oriented paradigm, right? It is not object oriented programming technique. It is an object oriented paradigm. These are all the things going forward we'll discuss, folks. A lot of in-depth is there. Going forward we'll discuss. Okay, so that's all from my side today. And whoever are interested, please start doing your registrations, because from Monday onwards, the link, Friday is the last day for the demos. And then Monday onwards, the new link will be go on. Okay, thank you so much. I'm stopping my screen share. See you tomorrow at the same time, that is 8:30 a.m. Thank you.